Hey everybody, welcome back with a new video. In today's episode I'm going to break down my latest short film, The Case, which I made for FX Home's Inside the Box video challenge. If you have not yet seen it, go check it out with the link in the description because, well, spoilers. I'll be showing a bunch of different things today. This will be a long episode. Timestamps are in the description. Feel free to skip around. So you're telling me that your wife was abducted by a ghost?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Who had access to the house key?
Only us two. No one else gets the key.
I see. Getting a bit paranoid, huh?
What?
Don't try to hide it. Lock on the bedroom door, reinforced windows, the grip of a CC-75B, SPO-1 handgun, no signs of forced entry. That and this note I found on the staircase. She wasn't abducted by a ghost. She was abducted by something far worse. You. Goodbye, Mr. Smith. That's the before and after. I will take a deep dive into the different sections and effects a little bit later in this video, but first I want to talk about my inspiration for this project. I had just finished watching the entirety of BBC's Sherlock, which led me to thinking of a shot where Sherlock opens a piece of paper with the writing appearing in the air. So with that idea in mind, I started working on an intro. The intro itself is actually really simple. I found a beautiful typewriter font which I used to write out the title. After that, I made a mask left of the text. I took a typewriter sound effect from Epidemic Sound and added that on the timeline. Now I could keyframe the mask's position to move and reveal a letter at each keystroke. I made sure to set the keyframe type to constant, meaning it maintains the previous value until the next keyframe. This led to a beautiful typewriter effect. At the end, I did the exact opposite, where I keyframed the mask to let the text disappear one letter at a time. Paired with a carriage return sound effect, it made a simple yet great intro. I wanted a bit of separation between the text and the black background, so I added a gray layer below the text with the grain and radial blur effects. I made sure to set the grain to monochromatic to fit the style. The radial blur was set to 0.5, which swirls the grain on the edge a tiny bit. Since this was a gray layer, it also affected the two black plane layers I keyframed to move up and down to create a split transition. The blur made it less sterile and added a bit of character to the shot. Then, once the intro splits, we get to the main shot. I wanted to go for a one take to make the suspense pop a bit more. Even though I wrote the script, it still took a whole bunch of takes to get it right. 14 to be exact. Windows, the grip of a CC-75B. She wasn't a grip of a CC-75B. 75, okay. Since I was filming this alone, I couldn't have a moving camera. I used some 3D trickery to get this to work. Let's break down the composite shot. I found an image of a wooden floor which I used as a backdrop. By using lens blur, hue saturation and lightness, curves, and brightness and contrast, I could turn the light brown texture into a punchy black and white one. I knew I lit my shot from the left side, so I wanted the right side of the background to be a bit darker. I added a gray layer with an oval mask which I feathered a lot. I inverted the mask, added brightness and contrast to darken the background, and added the film grain effect to make it a bit less stationary. I still felt like the background was a bit too bright, so I lowered the opacity to 77% and added a black plane layer behind it. Then it was time to add in the main shot. This was filmed in my room in front of a green screen. By using 2 lights on the green screen and 1 light left in the frame, I could separate myself from the background very easily. Another advantage of having a well-lit green screen is that you can set your ISO to the lowest value, generally creating the least noise in the picture. This is very useful for keying later on. I added a mask around me which I feathered a bunch. This made sure I only had green around me in the frame. I added the chroma key effect and selected a shade of green. Due to the lighting, this already worked very well. However, I was shooting at 24 frames per second. This created a very nice and cinematic motion blur, but it can also be a pain in the butt for green screen keying. As you can see, in certain parts of fast movement there is a green blur around the object. This is where the spill removal effect came in. It took away the green spill and left a very nice key. Then I took the hue, saturation and lightness effect to crank the saturation all the way down. After that I added the curves effect to make the black and white a bit more punchy. Then came the grade. To make everything fit together well, I added a grade layer with a 0.5 radial blur and a vignette. I have to say I really quite like the aesthetics of this video. The one effect making this whole short film work was the camera movement. If this was just a stationary shot or only zooming in, this would not have been as nice to look at. So what I did was create a camera inside of HitFilm. I took my shot and background layers and turned them 3D. I moved the background layer a whole distance back and scaled it up so that it fit the frame again. Now I could take the 3D camera and move it in and out, which created realistic parallax motion. Instead of looking like a shot which zooms in, it looks like a dolly shot. By using different keyframes and keyframe types, I could frame my video after it was shot. Then came the last effect, the text floating in air. This was quite a fun effect to make, but there are a few different ways of going about it. I'm going to see if I can make an in-depth tutorial, which I think it deserves. After the main shot was done, it was time to work on the credits. This is very simple. I just created a few text layers and typed in what I needed. Though with the typewriter effect, I think it looks quite pleasing. That is the video part done, but as the name audio-visual suggests, there is another part of making a video. The audio. The dialogue was recorded with the Rode VideoMic Pro. I'm still, after all this time of using it, very impressed with the sound quality. So much so that when I let my consulting editor, shout out to Heiko Rotteveel, take a look at my first draft, he remarked that the audio was a little bit too clean. I agreed with that, so I added a little bit of reverberance to make the audio a bit more volumetric. Initially, the client was also voiced by me, but Heiko stepped in and recorded that part, for which I'm very grateful. I also did a bit of audio treatment on that to match the room, and I panned it a bit to the left to make it sound like he was in the room seated in front of me. I kept the sound design very simple. All of the sound effects and music I use on the channel comes from Epidemic Sound. They have an enormous library of audio products. They do not sponsor this video, but if you decide to purchase a subscription using my affiliate link in the description, you help out the channel a bit. I found a few good typewriter keystrokes and a carriage return sound for the intro. For the rest, I used a room tone track to make the sound less sterile. And that's it for the sound effects. Then came the music. I started out with a different track, but I didn't really like it in the end. I switched it out for a new one which coincidentally had a beautiful hit sound on the climax of the monologue. She was abducted by something far worse. You. I couldn't have found a better track if I tried. So that was my in-depth breakdown of The Case. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Bye bye.